Well, welcome to the VERTO New Energy event series. My name's Michael Bennett, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Jason Sultana, Executive Officer of the Apprentice Employment Network, New South Wales and ACT. Thanks for joining us, Jason.
Thanks, Michael.
So, Jason, group training is uniquely Australian, highly successful employment arrangement for Australian apprentices. Can you tell us how it all works?
Sure. So group training companies, in a nutshell, they recruit and employ apprentices and trainees, and then they place them with businesses, or what we call host employers, who provide them with the work and on-the-job training. They've been around on 50 years now, and have been highly successful in working with every type of business, from small mum and dad businesses right up to corporations, councils, government, and the like.
So all sorts of business sizes, but what sort of industry areas do group training organisations cover in New South Wales?
There is not an industry we don't cover. So that's the wonderful thing about the group training model, or GTOs, that they are there to support all businesses and all industries. So everything from business qualifications, white collar sector, right up until where the areas that you're discussing around the clean energy, electrical, trades, you name it. They cover every industry and every location. So that's the wonderful thing about the model.
So to that end, how can we advocate the benefits of group training to large tier one contractors who are actually working on regional energy zone projects? They traditionally wouldn't engage with apprentices due to the project durations of around about 2 years.
So the wonderful thing about the group training model is that they are the legal employer. So what that provides to any employer is some flexibility in relation to how they employ apprentices and trainees. So if they use a group training company, the host employer can work around their actual cycle of employment. If that's a 2-year model, then what allows that to do is the host employer can give the apprentice back to the group training organisation to find another host employer to allow them to complete their apprenticeship. It also allows that employer that doesn't have the full scope of works to cover in the job that they're doing with their apprentice, to allow the GTO to find another host to help them cover everything that's required, particularly in some of the things like the electrical field, where they've got to cover so much in domestic and in industrial electrical areas.
So GTOs carry the employment risk per se, don't they?
Absolutely, and that's the thing. It's about they carry the risk, which means that they are the employer. They also then have to obviously cover the things like the workers' comp insurance, payroll, and all those other things like superannuation as well for those apprentices. What is more important is that it's about trying to find the right person for that host employer. So it's not about just finding the first kid off the street, or it's about making sure that there's the right fit for that employer, which then gives them a greater chance for success, but also gives them a greater chance to complete their apprenticeship.
So on that, statistically, group training apprentices do have a greater chance of completing their apprenticeship. So you've mentioned that it's the right fit for the right role with the right host. That's one factor. What are the other factors that contribute to the success of group training outcomes?
Well, group training is basically a 4-step process. So one, it's about the recruitment, selection, and induction. So it's about finding the right kid for the right role around the right requirements to complete an apprenticeship. So I use the analogy of not putting a square peg in a round hole. And that helps this process from the start. When a group training organisation works with a host employer or a business, we actually get them involved in part of the recruitment process. It's actually about finding out the work environment. It's getting them to understand their culture, about what are they looking for, what are the type of skill sets that they're after, to help identify from that. The next stage of that is the workplace support and training outcomes. So group training companies provide what we call a wraparound support service, which complements the work that, say, the VERTO is doing in this sector as well. So it's very much about looking at the right training, the right workplace supports, and reducing that burden on employers, but also improving the workplace relations from that perspective. We talked about the de-risking, which is the third part of it. So we look at the de-risking that employment relationship, but also reducing the administration burden that can be faced by working with apprenticeships and traineeships. So it's very much about that employment obligation side of things and the regulatory compliance that is actually been transferred to the group training organisation as they're the legal employer. And I suppose the final aspect is the completion and employment outcomes. Employers access a qualified person, obviously, to fulfil their business needs at the end, but also for apprentices and trainee, by going through a group training company, it actually increases their prospects for completing, but also earning higher incomes at the end of it. We know group training organisations are sitting at roughly about 74% completion rates compared to direct employment, which sits around about 50-51%. And on average around across the state of New South Wales, it sits about 50 to 51%. We know because of that higher rate of completion, we know we can get a better quality person through the system. But then obviously we know from our data that even people who complete an apprenticeship through a group training company, particularly in a trades, particularly some of this new clean energy area, we know about 94% of them actually go on to gain full-time employment straight after they finish their trades. And when we say trades, it may be a 4-year apprenticeship, but we look at opportunities, how they can complete them early on time within the legal requirements that are available.
So at the beginning of the journey for an apprentice, if you were talking to school leavers, what advice would you give them if they're looking to start an apprenticeship?
So we look at, I do a lot of careers days, and the conversation I have to a young person is to make sure they understand what their options are. So we obviously talk about the option about direct employment by an organisation, or through the option through a group training organisation. And what we always say to them is make sure you understand your journey. How is it going to go? How's it going to be? What support will you get? What's the history of the organisation you're going to work with to get them through to the end? What happens if you have a problem tomorrow in relation to your training, or you're not getting on well with your host employer your employer that you're working with? What will happen then? We explain how the GTOs roll from that perspective, but also then it's about how do you make sure that you're doing something that you're going to enjoy doing, not just the first job that comes up and you just get thrown straight into those positions. So we understand people are different. We understand people that are Indigenous. We understand people that are women who are looking at getting into male-dominated trades. But we're also understanding that different people have different needs, but we also need to work out, make sure that they fit with every employer that we can partner with. So going back to your question is about making sure a young person understands what their options are. And that's also about educating those parents about the understanding. One of the things you can guarantee with a group training organisation, you get paid on time, you get paid correctly as well.
Yeah, and as you said, they facilitate that match. It's not a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah,
and quite often, through our experience, the apprentice will leave because it's not what they expected. And GTOs are well known for facilitating pre-apprenticeship programs, pre-employment programs, which will give prospective apprentices a taste as to what the industry is going to be like.
But it's more important there too, Michael, it's about the work health and safety side of things. One of the things we want to make sure is we want to make sure young people go home after work. And it's really about that work health and support assessment that we do up front, but also the ongoing education, the supervision, the liaison with the organisation that they're working with to ensure that, yes, they do go home at night after the end of the day's work.
And they're paid on time, as you said. So, Jason, in terms of clean energy, what are some of the in-demand or emerging trades that you're seeing across group training in relation to the clean energy sector?
It's happening across all areas. I think we're seeing a lot of most of the trade areas starting to get some traction in there. So we obviously electrical, plumbing, carpentry, the construction side of things, but there is so many support industries around what's happening there that they're all starting to demand people. So we know the civil construction area is growing because they need to build the infrastructure around where the projects are going to be working. We know that even some of the other support roles, it could be anything from the business, project management. There's a lot of industries that are opening up. So there's not really one specific, but we think about electrical as well. Obviously, that's a well-connected industry with that. We know we need more than 50,000 electricians in this country over the next period of time. And so if you're not even thinking about becoming a tradesperson, say in electrical, there is a lot of support industries around that will actually be also looking for people in these particular projects.
And we know that the winner of the New South Wales Training Awards Apprentice of the Year was a woman and employed in a male-dominated trade. How do we encourage more women to participate in those male-dominated trades?
It's two things. We need to create the work environments to encourage women to be in those. So that includes the simple things like toilets, dressing rooms, a positive culture. We need to also look at better educating not only these school kids coming through at year 9, 10, 11 about the opportunities available, but also their parents. And it's really about understanding that and removing the stigma that's in there with some of the male-dominated areas. It's important though that the workplace environment is right, because If it's not right, they won't obviously have the opportunity to complete their apprenticeship or traineeship. And what we've seen, particularly with some of the strategies that are being targeted by Training Services New South Wales to schools, that education piece is starting to happen. And so a lot of the conversations I'm having at careers days, we are seeing a lot more young ladies coming up to us talking about becoming electricians, carpenters, plumbers, even civil construction and the like. So we're starting to slowly get there, but we still got a long way to go. And I think employers also have to consider their environments and how do they want to be perceived as an employer, as a choice as well, in relation to targeting women to get into it. And not only women, it's also mothers returning to the workforce as well.
Yeah. And what's great is we're also seeing young women who have trades behind them, happily advocating and being ambassadors, which is terrific. So speaking of awards, AEN New South Wales and ACT celebrates the success and achievements of group training apprentices and host employers with your own annual awards event. Can you tell us about the event and the award categories involved?
Yeah, so our awards is there about celebrating the best of the best that are employed through group training organisations in New South Wales. And we sort of recognise three sort of main category areas. One, we recognise the host employers. We have small host employers that are small, medium businesses, and we have large host employers that are mining companies, large electrical firms, councils, and we have categories for them. We then have categories that focus on our industry itself. So what we call our excellence in group training is looking at what group training organisations have done in partnership with other organisations to try to drive initiatives and drive strategies to help grow apprenticeships and traineeships. And then we have our individual awards. So we obviously recognise an apprentice of the year and a trainee of the year, but we also have some special category awards that we recognise young people who have done an apprenticeship or traineeship whilst they're at school. We look at our First Nations people and look at recognising them, in particularly with their apprenticeships or traineeships. We have the Women in Trade section, and that young lady that you were just talking about before, Rachel Pearson, I should say, she was our Women in Trades winner last year, who's just gone on, obviously, win the New South Wales Apprentice of the Year award. And our last category is that we look at our inclusion category to make sure that we recognise people who may not have a disability, but it may be some barrier that's got them into having difficulties finding employment, and maybe English is not their first language, and recognising those people as well. So a broad spectrum, which also is truly reflective of what group training is all about.
So where can people go to find out more about group training and the apprenticeships and traineeship opportunities that are currently available?
So it's an easy website, iwantanapprenticeship.com.au, which will take it to our website, which will contain all information about more about what group training is about, all the members of our network, their contact details and what industries and the like. Just remember, there's three types of group training organisations. There's ones that are industry specific, that focus on a particular industry. One that is location specific, that may focus on multiple industries, but in a specific area. And I have what I love to call the licorice all sorts. For people who are older, that would know that they basically cover all industries in all areas. So you'll find that on our website. You'll find more information about understanding the system, and more importantly, answer a lot of the questions that you might be thinking about.
Well, Jason Sultana, who is the Executive Officer of the Apprentice Employment Network of New South Wales and ACT, we appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.